I am back again to say a few words about Alice. I'm going to try to hold it back and not say a lot, but I still want to touch on some points about Alice and how it differs from Oliver Twist, but maybe has a few similarities as well. And of course, the similarities are basically that they are children. And children have a certain social status and they don't really have a lot of rights, especially in the Victorian era, as opposed to today where children do have rights. Oliver had no rights whatsoever. He was poor. He was at the mercy of the adults around him. And he could not go to the board and say, hey, these people are mistreating me. Why don't you do something about it? Alice didn't really have any rights either, but did she need rights? In her world, in the world that she occupied with her family, she was not mistreated. She did not go hungry, and she did not appear to be beaten. And remember, Alice is based on a real life character for whom Lewis Carroll had a particular affection. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of, the theories of whether Lewis Carroll had a little bit too much interest in little girls, because that's not germane to this topic, but Alice's childhood. Now, when she goes into Wonderland, she has no rights. Everybody is telling her what to do and how to do it. By the end of the novel, though, and we don't get to the end of the novel in this class, she asserts herself and she demands her rights. Not in so many words, but she refuses to be bossed around and told what to do any longer. Now, Oliver did not have an education. There was not even a question of him having an education when he was in the poorhouse. Now, we can pretty much assume that after Mr. Brownlow adopts him, that he is going to be educated. Alice, on the other hand, is educated. She can read, or is educated as she can be for a young girl. Now, remember, the Victorians were not real gung-ho about educating poor children, even though Sunday schools were instituted in the Victorian era or just prior to, in order to educate the poor so they could read the Bible. Now, Alice knows how to read, and even though she does, she also says, what is the use of books without pictures? So she also has an imagination. Now, girls and women education was not heavily emphasized for them as well, because it was expected, going back to gender issues, that well-to-do and upper-class women and middle-class women were going to marry and they weren't going to have to work, as opposed to poor women who always worked. The Victorian era, some myths arose about the Victoria that were fairly much applied to the time before that, and one was that women didn't work. The rise of the middle class in the Victorian era reflected this, and we see this well into the 20th century reflected in sitcoms, that women didn't work, but yeah, they did. Poor women always worked. And I think I might have talked about this in the module on the gender issues. Now, well-to-do women, they didn't work. They might have done charity work, but they wouldn't have worked outside the home. What could have passed for the middle class in earlier eras, merchants, women or couples who owned taverns, etc., those women worked as well. Now, remember, in the Victorian era, it was the goal of the middle class and the upper to-do for no one to work, not even the males. And in order to do that, you had to have people who worked for you. But I'm getting off topic here, and I understand that, and I'm going to get back on topic. Alice was educated. She was able to read. Now, whether or not it was expected that she would go on to a women's college and get educated, we don't know. But her situation is quite different from Oliver's in that as well. But if the administration of the poorhouse and the people in charge of the poor children in Oliver Twist are satirized and made fun of, education is also satirized in Alice. And from the point of view of even when Alice is falling and she says curiouser, curiouser, and is that even a word? And Carol also satirizes and ridicules the education that was popular in the Victorian era and other instances as well. And of course, I can't remember specifically which of them now, but darn it. I just drew a total and complete blank, and I will assure you I have read that novel over half a dozen times during my lifetime. But education is satirized, and what they are taught is satirized. Even the poetry within the book does this as well. When Alice can't remember Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and it is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Bat, and those types of aspects. But Alice is a coming of age. And as I noted in the video on Oliver Twist, Oliver comes of age, but it is through other people that he does this. Alice, as an upper class child, finds her beginning to come of age on her own. And when she is in Wonderland, again, she is consistently told what to do. Where's her gloves? The White Rabbit mistakes her for the maid. Where are the gloves? Even the roses criticize Alice. And when she meets the Duchess, there's all sorts of things that arise. And then, of course, the Queen of Hearts. Very dire circumstances arise because Alice is put on trial. And she is afraid. But by the end of the trial, when she is growing and the Queen commands the deck of cards, soldiers, to take care of Alice, she whips him aside with her hand and she said, "You are only cards." And this marks a great milestone for her, that she realizes they're just cards. She doesn't have to pay attention to a house of cards or card soldiers or all of the adults who are in Wonderland, because the adults are not making any sense. The Duchess is not taking care of her child. The Queen of Hearts is an arbitrary and quarrelsome woman. Now, whether she is meant to symbolize Queen Victoria is another discussion, and I'm not going to go into that. But Alice has more logic than the adults do. And this finally comes to the forefront when she realizes, you're a deck of cards. I don't have to do what it is that you want me to do. And I want to go off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think it is important to say this. Alice is an archetypal hero, and she goes on a hero's quest. She does not fulfill some of the aspects of the hero or the warrior. She is not part deity. She is not raised apart from her parents, but she goes on a quest of self-exploration. And not only that, in many of the quests, the hero descends into the underworld, and there are also many myths where deities and some mortals descend into the underworld, and this is exactly what Alice does. She goes down into the rabbit hole, into the underworld, and that is where she finds herself. And I'm writing a paper, and someday I'll have the time to finish it, where Inanna and Alice, Inanna, a goddess of Sumeria, and Alice are very much alike in they descend into the underworld to gain knowledge. And they both come out changed people. Alice is a changed person. She's still a child, but she's taken the first steps towards becoming an autonomous, independent adult and a woman who thinks for herself. Now, of course, she returns to Wonderland, not Neverland, that's Peter's place. She returns to Wonderland and through the looking glass, and I don't know if Carol would have written that second book if Wonderland had not been so popular, but it was extremely popular, and it continues to be very popular. It also capitalizes on the dream motif, in which Alice is dreaming her experiences in Wonderland. Does that mean that they're not real? I don't think so. Where do we draw the line between getting an experience from a dream or experiencing in real life and the results be the same? And the dream motif goes all the way back to Hesiod in Greece, when he says that he fell asleep in the shadow of, I want to say Mount Parnassus, but don't quote me on that. And he dreams that the deities, the Greek gods, talk to him, and he is informed of their whole procession from creation and the different myths. So this dream motif is very popular. It has been going on for a very long time. And Alice in Wonderland is based on that framework of the dream. And then the reader is left to wonder how much was a dream and et cetera, et cetera. But Alice has also been correlated with hallucinogenic drugs, but that wasn't the case in this. She was dreaming. I am up to 10 minutes and 39 seconds, so I am going to stop. I didn't say everything that I wanted to say, but I don't want to bore you either, even though that may be a foregone conclusion. So I'm actually going to remember to hit the stop button this time. So that's a few words about Alice and Oliver. Comparisons. They're both children. They are treated differently based on their status and their class in life, but they do have some similarities.